Yeah, and that's why I tell people, or actually my belief is that it's good to travel to different areas, different types of places,
Yeah.
Um, become more cultured, become more familiar with other cultures and with other areas. I think it's important because it does help with your so-called survival skills, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
It makes you
absolutely.
sharper, it makes you more understanding, it makes you clever, more clever. I don't know if you have you ever met someone where they're like, where you ask them like, or it comes up in the conversation, that they've never left their hometown. They've never been away
Oh
from their
yeah.
hometown.
Yeah, well, that was me
It's
for a long time. Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brayden Black, and in today's episode, we're talking all about another animated movie that relates to agriculture. And to talk about this movie with us, we have, I'm not sure he's a fan favorite necessarily, but an old guest, an old friend of ours, Brayden from Absolutely Gobsmacked. Brayden, remind the good people who you are.
I'm a fan favorite. That's who I am. I have lots of fans, okay?
All right.
Yeah, no, I'm Brayden from Absolutely Gobsmacked. So, yeah, that's me. I think maybe you guys will remember me from the well, what did we cover last time?
I think the last time you were on, we talked about what did we talk about? Because we did the Martian
The
episode,
Martian,
and
right?
yeah, I thought you came on for another one, but
Oh,
before that.
oh, and we did the speech.
Oh, right. Yeah, you came on
Yeah, we
for
did
the
about
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Speaking in agricultural, that kind of yeah, yeah, yeah. I forgot about that
Mhm.
episode. Yeah. So yeah, you've been on for a couple episodes now. So this is your third appearance. You're one of the few guests who's gotten to have three appearances. So congratulations. Um,
Oh,
yeah. So
that's great.
yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know or who hasn't heard of Brayden, Absolutely Gobsmacked is a great podcast in which they analyze movies and kind of the behind the scenes of movies and all that kind of fun stuff. So I'll put all the links down in the description so people can go find you and go check you out. But Brayden, would you like to let the audience know which movie we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, we're gonna be talking about Rango.
Yeah. So Rango, for anyone who doesn't know, is an animated movie. You probably have all the specs on it. Didn't you guys do an episode on Rango recently?
We have not done an episode of Rango yet.
Oh, okay. I could have swore I saw Rango in your. You did some Johnny Depp movie, and I thought it was Rango maybe, but um,
We mentioned it as wanting to do it. We mentioned an episode one time. Maybe that's what you're thinking of.
that could have been it. Yeah. But yeah, so Rango, it's an animated movie. Obviously it stars Johnny Depp as the main character, Rango. It's about a chameleon, who's living in this old west style town, and he has to save the town from the usual corruption that goes on with old west towns. You have a gunslinging snake, and you have a corrupt leader who's trying to take land, and there's a water shortage and all kinds of fun stuff. So before we hop into the ag connection to this, why did you suggest this topic to me, Brayden? This was your idea after all.
Well, one, it's I would say arguably my favorite animated movie.
Interesting.
Arguably. Um, yeah, it's tough to pick one, but it's definitely in the conversation.
Hmm.
And two, because I always knew there was an there was a tie to agriculture, I should say. So that's why I suggested it to you for your show because I think I would enjoy talking about it, and I think there's a tie into to the subject matter.
Yeah, that makes sense. And honestly, when you first brought it up, I hadn't seen Rango since the first time I saw it, way back when it first came out. So it had been a few years. So I was a little, I wasn't quite sure where the ag connection was right away because all I remember is him getting into the fight with the gunslinging snake, and I was like, well, I mean, it's Western, but is it really ag? And then I rewatched it, and I was like, oh yeah, I see it now. So that kind of ties in.
Hmm.
So you said it's one of your favorite, if not your favorite, animated movies. Would you mind talking about why that is?
I just think it's an original story. I think that voice acting is superb. Johnny Depp is my favorite actor,
Hmm.
so there is a little bias there, but I think that he does a fantastic job in this role. The way they shot it or they filmed it was a little unique. It wasn't motion capture, but they recorded their voices as the actors literally acted out each scene.
Hmm.
So instead of them standing in a booth like normal animated movies where they just record their lines, they did it a little differently where they had the actors actually act out the scenes together. And you can see on some behind the scenes clips on YouTube, but I just like the way they approached it, and I thought that the story itself was unique, and I think the movie is hilarious, and I don't get bored of rewatching it.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I have to agree with you there. It's a very rewatchable movie. It's a very fun movie. You know, it's very goofy. It's got some humor that is it can go over kids' heads, but it's still an enjoyable kid movie at the same time. It's a very unique animated movie for its time. It kind of plays a lot of it does a lot of things that animated movies kind of refuse to do for a long time. So it's definitely interesting.
It's just a really great Western movie, and I
Yeah,
like Westerns.
yeah, no,
Hmm.
it definitely plays the Western role really well. And to your point, it kind of it almost it almost makes references to other Western movies. It has the whole Clint Eastwood scene and all that kind of stuff to kind of show that it's like not necessarily making
Yeah.
fun of Western movies, but it's trying to make that call back while still being an original, which is really well done. So now kind of getting into the bare bones of this conversation, obviously it being a Western, it would have to have something to do with the rural area, which tends to be associated with agriculture. But the actual agricultural connection here is one that uh, I think that you really don't have to dig too far to find, but you have to almost think about it in a different context than what the movie provides it in. So obviously we have the main issue of the story, which is the water crisis. They're having a massive drought or massive shortage of
Hmm.
water, which anyone who listens to this podcast knows I'm from California and we have a very common issue with that. So it's not an unfamiliar issue to watch if you're a Californian. Um, so that's a whole thing. I mean, anyone who's involved in agriculture knows water is essential for all life. And that even if you're not involved in agriculture, that's a pretty common thing to know. So it's a very good basis to have an agricultural movie on. I mean, you see land go, you see issues with land going up for sale because people can't afford to grow it anymore with lack of water. That's an issue that we're seeing in real life today. I mean, in my hometown of Tulare, which I'm actually in right now for the first time in a while, there's all kinds of land that's going for sale just because they don't have the water to sustainably grow food anymore, which is very sad to see from a from an agriculturalist perspective.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know if you had anything you wanted to comment on in terms of the water situation
Well,
or kind of how they handle that.
it wasn't something I was familiar with when I first saw the movie,
Hmm.
you know. So it was a unique perspective for me, a new perspective. And it kind of got me interested in thinking like, is that really happening? And then it's like, doing research and looking at it, yeah, it is happening, not just in third world countries, but you know, it happens here and in some places in America.
Yeah.
Um, so it was unique to look at it, and then eventually, I'm sure we'll get into it, but how you find out how or why is happening, and that a lot of it is man-made, a lot of it is human error.
Hmm.
It's just interesting.
Yeah. No, I mean, you bring up a solid point. I mean, the movie itself kind of draws attention to an issue that isn't talked about a whole lot outside of the whole, like, yeah, there's third world countries that don't have water conversation, but it is a very common issue. I mean, especially in the agricultural sectors, you're seeing that happen all the time is, water shortages and land going, going dry and all that kind of stuff. And as you mentioned, the conflict about what's causing the water shortage, what's causing all this land to go up for sale, and kind of the corruption that's going on like the almost governmental level is kind of a really interesting thing to talk about in a in an animated movie. It's not something that really gets brought up a lot. Um, and it's something that I mean, I think that a lot of people like you, and like myself when I first watched the movie, kind of watch it and they're like, oh yeah, it's a cool Western story, so there's going to be conflict, but that's it's just like it's dramatized for the movie. And a lot of people don't realize that no, that's literally how things are in a lot of places and like in our own country as well as in other developing countries as well. We're seeing massive, human error that's causing, and sometimes it's not even error, sometimes it's, it's intentional action that's causing,
Yeah.
shifts in the environment, that's causing, dangerous levels of water shortage that are causing, land to go for sale for, one reason or another. Like it's a real issue. It's not something that's just a Hollywood story.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can tell I got inspiration from real life. You can kind of
Yeah.
tell there's a lot of genuineness, a lot of like reality, being based in reality. So that's kind of what piqued my interest because it's like this is like a very specific issue. It seems like they got inspiration from something that was real,
Yeah,
and you
definitely.
can tell,
Yeah. And
you
so
know.
my memory's a little spotty at the
Hmm.
moment, but obviously so you have the turtle who's running the town, and then he ends up being the one that's kind of causing a lot of the issues with the land, and he's the one that's kind of like the corrupt figurehead of the town, right? Um and so would you mind kind of reminding, myself and the audience, how the water situation is being handled? Obviously, you have the pipeline underground that's the whole conflict with water not being available in certain areas, and the conflict with, they think that they don't have water but they actually do, it's being hidden. Like, could you kind of just give us a synopsis of the conflict of the whole story?
Yeah, basically, I mean, the main character Rango basically stumbles into this town. He's a pet, and he
Hmm.
he basically gets lost, right? And I definitely encourage those that haven't seen the movie to go watch it for sure. But he stumbles upon this, town of basically it's animals. They're all, speaking animals. That's the whole movie's. So he stumbles upon this town and he basically like stumbles into this drama that's going on, this drought really, and how it's affecting everyone. And I do believe that there's a lot of like selfish reasoning by Rango, especially towards the beginning of the movie, because he wants water too. You know what I mean? He's just
Right.
thirsty, right? So that's kind of the motivator for a lot of things, and him trying to go search for water himself and try and find water for himself, and that's kind of the case a lot of times in real life is um, people really initially they just want to take care of themselves and their families, even though it affects everybody. I think like a lot of people, as long as they're taken care of, they really don't care how everyone, unless it affects them, whatever what happens to everyone else. For the most part, obviously, there's a lot of people that do care, right? And they want to make a difference. So, but I do think Rango represents a lot of people today in the way that he wants water for himself, really, and that's what he cares about.
Hmm.
There's a scene in the bank where there's a little bit of water left, and he basically sneaks water to himself while he's trying to encourage the town, to stay
Hmm.
positive. So he becomes basically like the sheriff in a way with a lot of comedic shenanigans. But yeah, the whole basis of the story is they need to, find a way to get their water back, basically.
Hmm.
And Rango happens to find out. The mayor of the town, I believe they're developing like a community a little ways away, and that's kind of where all the water's been going. There's a scene where they're golfing, hit the mayor and some other of his people, I believe, and you see, like basically the mayor shows him, what's been going on, and there's sprinklers, and there's it's basically been like a new community being developed. So that's where all the water's been going is away from this poor town with all these poor citizens, and the mayor's using it for his personal gain, right? So there's a lot of greed that goes into this because water is signified in this context. It's basically like currency. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's used as it's represents currency. The bank has just instead of a vault, it's this huge water tank, and it's running on empty.
Yeah.
So so I think there's a lot of similarities between greed and the water shortage. There's a lot of ties to that in this movie,
Yeah.
which was interesting. But yeah, that's basically like the basics, the gist
Yeah.
of it.
No, I think that's a good, a good synopsis of the whole thing. And I really
Hmm.
like your comparison there of, Rango to kind of, your average person. So I think that's,
Yeah.
that's extremely accurate. I mean, you have a lot of people, and this has been my experience even through doing this podcast, which is, you have a lot of people who they may care about an issue, but they don't realize they care about it until they have a reason, until there's like something in it for them almost. So it's like, with like the agricultural situation, my whole goal is to get people to be more aware of agriculture. More often than not, the people that I come across that want to talk about it, the reason they became interested in it is because they noticed, well, now there's a food shortage, or now food prices have gone up, or now there's not as much, I can't talk, not as much access to, a food that they wanted, or maybe they see farms in their local areas that are going up for sale, or, it's like, there's always, something that's affecting them before they're like, oh, maybe I should help fix this. Um, and that tends to be the case, right? Like we don't really pay attention to a problem until it affects us, which is, I think really, really well portrayed through Rango's character, which obviously we get to watch his whole development into an actual semi decent person, from being just this selfish jerk who just wants all the water to himself to, being able to actually like save the town and help out all the people, and, get the girl and all that kind of fun stuff. But no, it's absolutely the case that, we have to, kind of look at some of these issues from a, from a faraway perspective to realize just how big of an issue they really are, or how,
Hmm.
how some of the things that we didn't, we may think it's like a water shortage now, and really it's a water reallocation to something that it really isn't in need of it, like, like the new
Right.
city, or, it's like there's always like something else behind the scenes that tends to be happening. And that's a perfect, it's a perfect analogy for how issues happen in the real world, agricultural or non. I mean, we see agricultural issues happen on a large scale all the time, where it's like, it's not that we don't have this resource, it's being used for something that it shouldn't be being used for, and so now we don't have enough of it anymore. And that tends to be a somewhat, unfortunately, a somewhat common issue that,
Mm.
agriculturalists and scientists and researchers are always trying to work on ways to make our resources last as long as possible. That way we don't have to worry about running out of water, or running out of food, or running out of this, that, or the other thing. It's just not always that simple.
Yeah. No, you're right. Um, and I think, the point's made that basically, Rango does, start to care and make, at the end of the day, if you're trying to benefit everyone, you benefit yourself in the long run.
Right.
You don't want to just, because if you focus on benefiting yourself temporarily, or, in the present, you'll still be affected in the long run. So I think the movie, at least for me, makes the point to make a difference overall, try and make the big changes, that'll help everybody, and it'll only benefit you and the people you care about as well.
Yeah. No, that's a good way of looking at it. I mean, why make a small impact that'll help you for a short term when you can make a large impact that helps everyone, including you, for a long term?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, in terms of, animation and like movie design and all that kind of stuff, I'm not super familiar with how a lot of that stuff works. I know that you have more of a knowledge on that than I do, but I really liked how they portrayed a lot of the, like the citizens of the town, and like just the general atmosphere of the whole movie. Like it was very much like, obviously it's supposed to be like an old Western, but like your throat gets dry just watching the movie.
Yeah.
It's very much like like you feel like you're in a dusty old town, and like you can actually like feel like the emotion on like the characters' faces when they're like, like the little girl, like the little mouse or possum, whatever she is, the girl
Hmm.
that Rango, that's following Rango around, and like, and looks up to him. Like you can like feel like the emotions of like the children, and like the townsfolk, and like the, like when you see the turtle, you instantly just know like, oh, that he's terrible. Like he just gives off that this demeanor of like, I don't trust that guy. um
Yeah. No, I like the accuracy of that, as well as the accuracy of the actual animals. They used animals that would actually be in that kind of ecosystem. You know what I mean?
yeah, no,
Uh,
it's, I mean, and the introduction of Rango is such a fun way of doing that, because like you said, they have, very common animals for that environment. Then they have a chameleon that comes out of nowhere, and everyone's just like, well, you're obviously not from here, because you're not a desert animal, you're a chameleon, so what are you doing here? And he has the
yeah.
whole fight with the snake, and the whole like, all that kind of, it's just such a cool, stylistically it's a very fun approach to it.
Right, yeah. And then that's just adds to the not just the intrigue, but the entertainment value.
Right. And one of the things that, I mean, like, obviously is not so much a thing anymore, but you still see similar ideas to it. It's all Rango can be interpreted very well as a metaphorical movie, obviously, but
Right.
you have the rattlesnake. I think his name's Jake, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rattlesnake that him and Rango face off at the end. And he has the whole like his gun is part or his tail is part gun, and he has like this whole intimidation factor going on with him. Um, and you have the like he's basically a hired gun that's hired to take down the sheriff, and it turns out that he was being lied to the whole time too, and so he kind of turns on the turtle at the end, and like there's this whole like that whole mentality of there's always like somebody in the middle that's doing what they think is good or what they think is helping, and then it turns out that they're just getting kind of lied to the whole time, and so they kind of turn their turn around to the other side, and it's just kind of like a I don't know, like you see that trope happen in a lot of different types of media, and I think they did just portrayed it really well with Jake as a character because he's like terrifying, right? And he ends up being like one of the saving graces at the end.
Yeah. And another point that I think I got from the movie is Rango, you could basically say, I mean, really he's spoiled because he's a pet,
Right.
but you could compare him to like a city boy that
Yeah.
moves to farm town. You know,
Yeah. No,
have you ever seen people like that try to adjust?
oh, absolutely. I mean, it's I've seen it both ways. So I'm obviously a rural area kid that I moved to a big city for college, and it was a shell shock trying to get used to kind of like the urban lifestyle.
Yeah.
Um, and I met people that I made friends there that were very much like, wait, you don't do this back where you're from? I'm like, no, no, no. Where we're from, I do this, this, and this, and they're like, that's so weird. Like the culture
Hmm.
is just very different. And I've seen the reverse. I've seen people move from big cities to, my small town or to other surrounding small towns. I've even taken people on like on farm tours that are from cities, and just kind of seeing their reaction to some of the ways that we handle things here is just so. It's really funny because it's kind of similar to how Rango reacts. He's kind of like disgusted at first with the town and like all the people and everything, and as he begins to live there, longer, he starts to realize kind of the value of what's there and all that. And that tends to be the reaction that I get too. Is you have people who move into a small farm town. They're like, ew, cows, and like everything's all dusty, and it's all kind of like gross, and they don't they just want food, or they just want water or whatever, and they have to like work and like do all this stuff, and then over time they're like, man, you know what, this is even better than where I was living before. Why didn't I move here sooner? It's always like that kind of fun revelation of like people don't realize what they're missing until they get it, kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
and I thought the movie did a good job of showing that transition. Someone more like extroverted, I guess,
Yeah.
trying to make adjustments and fit in,
Yeah. No,
you
that's a
know.
fun way of looking at it. And I don't know what your experience is, with the whole urban versus rural living area, or if you've been in that situation or know anyone that's been in that situation before, but
Well, it's hard because I have lived in kind of both, like
yeah.
big city and rural. I'm more of a city person. Where I'm at now, it's very half and half, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
You've got city, and it's not like a big city like a New York City. We don't have skyscrapers, but we've got downtown area with things to do. And then you go just 10 to 15, 20 minutes north, and you got rural. You got farms, you got farm animals, you got you know, markets with fresh produce and just different than going to like a big corporate grocery store.
Right.
Um, so we got a good mix of both. Um, so I'd say it's different. You know what I mean? Because you've
Yeah.
got towns that are just big city, and then you've got towns that are just strictly rural, away from the city. You got to drive quite a bit to get to the city. Um, and I think that's just different, when you have like a good mix.
Yeah. No, I think that you have a solid point there. There's definitely a I mean, I would honestly almost make the argument that those kind of in betweener cities are almost more fun to live in, because then you're not
Hmm.
having to drive super far to get what you want, but you still get the
Right.
kind of like laid back, relaxed lifestyle of avoiding the skyscrapers and the big metropolitan areas.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're right on that. Um, there you get a lot of the same pros, but kind of mixed in together. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's good. Um, so yeah, I think this one more is more of the movie itself is more of like a drastic change, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah. The kind of
Um,
shell shock, personality
yeah, kind
switch.
of like what are you guys doing? Like how are things? It's almost like his knowledge was based on like entertainment or what he sees, what you see on movies and things like that. So that's how he tried to adjust is based on that knowledge, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. No,
And
and
it worked out, but not, not because he was smart about it, but he just kind of got really fortunate in a lot of ways.
yeah, no, exactly. And I love that they made it so like he's a chameleon, obviously, right? So his whole thing is adaptation to his environment.
That's true.
And it's super fun how they made it. So like when he first gets there, like yeah, he tries to act all like tough and he tries to act like a cowboy and he starts like walking like some of the guys on the street and he starts to kind of like act like the civilians and everything to try to fit in because that's like his thing. That's how he's camouflaging. And I thought that was so
Right.
funny. And then obviously, like over time, that slowly becomes an actual part of his character.
Yeah, he just kind of becomes like he just kind of fits in. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
a good point. I didn't think about it that way. Is that he represents the animal that he is.
yeah,
Um, that's true. Didn't even cross my mind, but yeah, you're right. He basically learns to adapt and blend in.
yeah,
Um, but I've got experience trying to do that. Even when you're like visiting a place,
yeah.
you kind of gotta like adapt and learn how to fit in because you don't ever like feeling different. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even though you are, like if you visit a new place, like let's say you go on vacation for 2 weeks in a big city, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to like pick up as much as you can. You may even do research ahead of time,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so you make effort to adapt, so you don't feel so out of place, so that you can feel more comfortable. But in Rango, he was like thrown in, right?
Right.
And he had to adapt quick.
Yeah.
Um, which is interesting. Like, how would how would we react if we were thrown into a situation like that where, someone from the big city all of a sudden has to be thrown in or move in or relocated to a farm town, right?
Right.
Strictly farm and it's just interesting to think about.
Yeah. No, I mean you're absolutely right. It's a very, it's a fun hypothetical to kind of think, to put yourself in. It's like, if I were in Rango's shoes, if my entire world just changed, if I wasn't,
Hmm.
if I didn't have a choice and I just kind of got, flung into this weird environment that I'm not used to, would I even survive? Because he almost did. There were multiple times that he very easily could have been killed just because of his own
Yep.
stupidity. But he found a way to adapt. For better or for worse. But it's really you always think like, oh yeah, I'd be fine. I'd figure it out. And then you get there and you're like, I don't know what to do here. I don't know. I don't know anyone here. I don't know what this environment's like. I don't know where to go. Like it's such a different place to be that it kind of it almost kind of shuts you down for a little while until you figure out what you want to do.
Yeah, and that's why I tell people, or actually my belief is that it's good to travel to different areas, different types of places,
Yeah.
um, become more cultured, become more familiar with other cultures and with other areas. I think it's important because it does help with your so-called survival skills, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
It makes you
absolutely.
sharper, it makes you more understanding, it makes you clever, more clever. I don't know if you have you ever met someone where where you ask them like, or it comes up in the conversation, that they've never left their hometown. They've never been away
Oh
from their
yeah.
hometown.
Yeah, well, that was me
It's
for a long time.
Yeah, but I mean, like I'm talking like adults,
Yeah.
or at least like older teenagers, 18, 19, 20, where they're already graduated from high school and that's like a really good time, especially if you're single, even if you're not single, to go and travel, and go and explore more.
Yeah, I get
I've
you.
met people that never took advantage of that, and uh, and they don't understand a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that people can be more stubborn or set in their ways if they stay put too long, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that there's inferior in any way, but it definitely affects people.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's it's really, when it's almost like it's that same idea as like, if you just stay inside your entire life and you never go outside and play or anything, like you might never get sick, but when you do, it's gonna hit you really hard. Like
Hmm.
it's that idea of like building up a resistance to things that can hurt you.
That's
Y-
true.
yeah, and so it's like, I mean, I've met people from the Midwest and from Montana and from all these different like country or states that I'm, haven't been to, but I've gone to conferences in the Midwest that I've met all these people at, and they are very, very different than what I consider, normal for my area. And they look
Mhm.
at me and they're like, "Oh, you're from California. Well, you must act this way, and you must think these things, all this kind of stuff." And it's funny hearing the way that they think about Californians when, obviously I know why they think that way, but Californians
Right,
are very different depending on where they come from in the state. Um, I'm very different than somebody who's going to come from Northern California or Southern California.
right.
Um, and so it's just like funny, like I remember I met a friend from Montana, and I was talking to her because she has a purebred herd of beef cattle, and as I'm a big fan of beef cattle, I was asking her like, oh yeah, well how many cows do you have? And she like got incredibly offended, and I was so confused as to why. And she told me that in Montana, it's considered offensive to ask how many cows somebody has. I had
Hmm.
never heard of that before. That was not something that ever crossed my mind. I mean, I guess I could kind of see why. It's kind of the same idea as like asking how much money somebody makes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But just that small difference. I mean, like I come from a cow town. I mean, we literally like my hometown. We literally call it cow town. I asking how many cows somebody has is far from an offensive question where I come from.
Hmm.
People almost brag about how many cows they have. So I asked her, and to hear that response, I was kind of like, whoa, like even people who are from similar backgrounds have very different cultures depending on where they're from.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that about Montana, but
Yeah.
that makes sense. I mean, those things happen when you go to different areas. There's certain questions that you deem normal to ask that you're not supposed to, quote unquote, right? Or you shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's considered rude, right? It's the same thing like with like sarcasm.
Mm-hmm.
Down where I'm at now is considered disrespectful. Like even as a joke, you know?
Interesting.
Like they have people that joke around, right?
Yeah.
But it's the type of humor, right? The sarcasm is considered disrespectful, um, even among peers, not just with especially with older ones, right? But even among peers, it's considered disrespectful. It's just different than what I was used to growing up. So yeah, things like that, where it's just like you have to watch how you say things, what you say, the context of everything you have to take into consideration, So it was just interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Huh. That is interesting. I mean, I've definitely noticed similar differences. I mean, I currently live an hour from my hometown. It's just, just 45 minutes to an hour north of where I came from. And the culture even between those two areas is just vastly different. I mean, where I grew up, like it's very much like you're not supposed to call anyone by like Mr. or Mrs. whatever. Like you're supposed to call them by their first name, even like adults, like the only people you call Mr. or Mrs. are like, teachers or like the elders of the community, like the very,
mhm,
very old people. Because everyone else, if you call them Mr. or Mrs., that's like, you're basically calling them old.
right.
And so like that was like how I grew up. You call everyone by their first name, adults, kids, whoever. Um, and so when I moved up to where I live now, like I go and like visit my girlfriend's family and like all their like, friends and everything. And everyone over there is Mr. and Mrs. So I'm like, really uncomfortable calling them Mr. and Mrs. because I don't want to call them old in my language. But up there they consider it offensive if I call them by their first name. So I have to like explain to them like, hey, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I can't like, because of how I grew up, I can't talk like that. That just feels really strange to me. And they consider it really weird that I call everyone by their first name. So it's like, even like in small areas like that, a very
Hmm.
rural area and a very urban area, even like an hour apart, have very, very different rules and standards for how they function.
Yeah, yeah, and people that kind of stay put, they don't really experience that or realize that. Um,
Right.
which I mean, obviously, if they stay in their own area, it's fine, you know. But if you're thrown into a situation, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
the more you know, the more prepared you are, the better you'll be, the better off you'll be, right?
Yeah. I mean, going back to Rango,
Hmm.
we see him get thrown to this society that's very different than what he knows as a pet.
Right.
And he does a lot of things that people consider rude, and he kind of
Hmm.
he sees things that he's kind of like, that's that was weird, why did he do that, like it's very
Right.
a very culturally different area than what he's used to, so it's kind of fun seeing his interactions and how he gets used to their culture.
Yeah, do you remember that there's a scene in Rango at the beginning when he first enters the town
Yeah.
where he's trying to fit in, so he sees how different people walk and he's like copying it.
Yeah.
There, I think like sometimes like we do that. I don't know if you ever like not necessarily with like how people walk, but like the way people talk.
Mm-hmm.
You can pick it up, and some people like legitimately try and speak that a certain way if they're in a certain part, a different part, and there's like a different accent.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to like want to speak that way so that we're better understood, we can better fit in. So I thought that was interesting, like it showed that because it's true, like we do that as people too. We try to fit in by copying the people around us, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know that from what I'm told, I haven't witnessed this firsthand, but
Hmm.
I'm told that when I'm, up north in where I live now, I speak very much like a normal, Californian. I have a very urban, style accent. But when I'm back home, I have more of like a country kind of, twangy accent, which is it's not like a very southern accent necessarily, but I've been told like I mean, I had an episode, a few months back now where I interviewed a guy and he was like, he was from the East Coast and he was like, "You're sure you're not from the Midwest?" I'm like, "No, I'm from California." And he was like, "You sound like a Midwesterner. Like you just have that, like not quite as like thick of an accent, but you
Hmm.
have that kind of like country drawl to you." I had never heard that before. I always thought I sounded like a Californian. Um, so it's funny, and my accent changes depending on where I am in the state. But like my dad, on the other hand, he's kind of like the opposite. Like his accent adapts to who he's talking to. So like if he's talking to somebody who has kind of like a more southern accent, his accent gets more southern. And he doesn't do it on purpose. He like doesn't even know he's doing it. I've pointed it out to him before and he doesn't know what I'm talking about. But he has customers all over the world, so he'll talk to people in different accents, and his voice, like if he's on the phone and he's talking to somebody, I can tell which customer he's talking to based off of how his voice changes. Because he'll like and he doesn't do it to be rude or anything. It's kind of just like when he hears something, that's what his brain switches to. So like if he's talking to one of his customers in Mexico, he develops almost more of like a Mexican style accent. Or if he's talking to one of his customers in Scotland, his Scottish accent kind of comes out. It's weird watching it.
Yeah, that no, that is interesting. It's funny.
Yeah.
So, but like, so the ending, and I'm having a hard time remembering exactly how it ends. I know Rango faces off against Rattlesnake Jake, but
Yeah.
and obviously the town gets its water back. Um, I guess, do you remember how they get their water back?
Well, I know that Rango sets up this whole plan where he has a bunch of his buddies like stationed all over the town, and they all kind of like shoot at Jake in different orders, and that causes Jake to get distracted. And then he has somebody underground working with this team, and they like break one of the pipes,
Oh,
um,
that's right.
and that causes
Hmm.
the water to erupt everywhere. And then that's so he basically like lures Jake into this area of the town, and then the water shoots him up into the air and like knocks him out, and that's kind of how he defeats him. And then yeah, it's like raining everywhere,
And they get their water back.
and they get their
Obviously,
water
that's
back.
not
Yeah.
that doesn't solve our real life problems.
No, but
So, what do you think would, like, for example, in your area, what do you think would solve the drought, a lot of the drought problems? I'm sure there's different solutions and different ideas, but what
yeah,
have you found?
there's plenty of speculation about what's best to fix the drought. There's no like one size fits all solution.
Hmm.
The big problem in my area is that people are arguing about what's really causing the drought. You have some people that are saying it's environmental, some people saying that it's climate change, some people
Hmm.
saying that it's it's political, that like the reason that we don't have water is because we're not we don't have like basically the government's not giving us enough water, which is kind of a similar idea to what Rango is about. And so there's like a lot of different speculation about what's causing the drought, so that kind of makes it difficult to solve.
Hmm.
My personal belief is that if we had better water infrastructure, so better dams, better reservoirs, better areas to hold water and transport water, we would see a lot less issues with shortages. But that's not the end all be all solution. There's some talks that need to
Right.
be have about surface water usage and groundwater usage and all that kind of stuff. But that is like kind of I think the first step in the process is just making sure that we can hold on to the water that we do have, because we get a lot of water, but then we kind of just send it off into areas that don't need it. We send it off to the ocean, we send it off to random lakes and rivers that don't need more water than they already have. It's kind of
Hmm.
like a there could be an allocation fix first, and then we can start kind of talking about better ways to, because I mean like right now our biggest issue is just that we don't get enough rain. Well, the thing is we do kind of get enough rain, not all the time. We definitely have dry years, but when we do get wet years, we don't do anything with the water that we get. We kind of just
Yeah,
let it sit there.
that makes sense.
So that's my big solution, is let's find better ways to put the water somewhere to use before we just start saying we don't have any.
Oh, what about creating artificial rain,
Art
controlling the weather?
That would be interesting. I'm not sure what the long term ramifications of that would be on the environment, but I'd be curious to see how it work.
Kind of like cloudy with a chance of meatballs kind of deal, something like
Yeah,
that.
I mean, not to. There are some people that think that that's what's happening. They think that we just that there's some machine up in the sky that's making it so we're not getting any rain right now, which is an interesting conspiracy. Um, but yeah, so there's a lot of speculation, a lot of theories. I mean, if somebody did want to create a weather machine that gives us more water,
Hmm.
again, as long as we can allocate the water properly, and as long as we're not going to cause any like super weird weather storms, then I think go for it.
Yeah, if we could find out some kind of way,
Yeah.
maybe you can come up with a way and just go on Shark Tank.
We'll see. I mean, if I can come up with a solution to the drought situation in California, I think that I'll make a lot more money than Shark Tank can give me, because that's kind of the $1 million question right now.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
yeah, I mean, I just did a article for my job on the snow survey we just got. So we seems like we're getting a decent amount of snow, which is good. So we might be in a bit of a better water situation this year. Knock on wood.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So I was gonna ask. So
Hmm.
I can't remember now. Do we see any of the actual farms in Rango, or we just kind of hear about them?
Yeah, we basically hear about them. You see, yeah, they basically talk about it like what's her name? Beans talks about
Yeah.
her farm and it belonged to her father. I believe he passed away.
Yeah.
So now like she has to watch over it and she's gonna lose the farm. They're gonna lose their farms basically because there's no water, so they're gonna lose their crops. Um, but I think you see like people like coming in with wagons with like different crops and things like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. I do remember seeing that. Yeah. So I was gonna say
Yeah,
I don't remember what kind of crops they grow in that area. Because I mean, do we know where it is in the world? Like what geographic location it's at?
that's a good question. I can check. Let me look it up.
Okay. So say I don't remember ever hearing where it's at in the world. So I was curious about like what kind of
Oh,
crops they
yes, they
grow.
mentioned it.
Did they?
The Mojave Desert.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So they really don't grow. They really don't grow a whole lot over there then.
That's in
Um.
Nevada. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So, yeah, I was gonna make a comment about like, I wonder what their, how much water they really need for the kind of crops that they grow, but I'm not even sure what kind of crops they would grow over there.
I saw cacti.
Yeah, that one makes sense. That one doesn't need a whole lot of water.
So here's some crops that are grown in that desert. Let's see here. Let me um let me make sure this is accurate.
Yeah,
Um, so and this could be inaccurate, but here's an example, a list of some that could be grown in that desert. Watermelons, apples, green onions, cucumbers, corn, hot peppers, melons, bell peppers, radishes, carrots, cabbage, soybeans, pears, tomatoes, squash, and spinach.
Hmm, interesting. Um, I mean, those aren't the crops I was expecting over there, but I mean that some of those make sense. I mean, like corn can grow almost anywhere, so I mean it's pretty, it's a pretty versatile crop for that kind of stuff. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, like some of those like spinach and stuff like that, like I mean watermelon, like I feel like there wouldn't be enough water over there for all of that.
Maybe.
But huh,
Um, yeah, this article says that that desert doesn't really have enough to sustain
yeah.
typical crops. So I don't know what that other article is talking about, but
I'm reading one right now that says, yeah, I see one that says the Desert can't sustain any kind of farming, but there's one that says Antelope Valley, which is right next to it, does have a lot of farming, like onions, carrots, potatoes, all that kind of stuff.
okay.
So it might be the valley that has the crops in it.
You think, hmm.
So in terms of Rango, I don't know then. Maybe they do have, like small farms like closer to the
You
valley
think
side of
that's
things.
where they got inspiration though, is that the surrounding towns are able to grow crops, but the actual desert does not? So
Maybe
that's like the comparison between the town of dirt and the community being built outside of it.
that could be. I could see that being the case. So then, with that, there's argument of like, is there really anything wrong with them not having water in that town if they can't do anything with it anyways?
Are they are the real life farms outside of the desert taking water away from the desert? Is that possible?
Not that I know of. I mean, as far as I can tell, the desert doesn't have a ton of water in the first place, so there's really not much for them to
Hmm.
take. But yeah, I don't see anything here saying that they're taking water from the desert. It seems like they all kind of have their own sufficient water supplies. Interesting.
I read a fun fact recently, by the way,
Hmm.
because I'm very, very green when it comes to farming. Um, that a lot of like a fake fun fact or like a fact that people have seen around that's like not true or not something that you would want to take advice or take as advice
Hmm.
is like if you're in a desert and you're thirsty, people say to drink water from the cactus, but I read that it actually dehydrates you because it gives you diarrhea and things like that.
Huh. Interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, I had read that. I forgot where I read. It was an article somewhere, like facts, like it was like a list of facts that people give out that are actually like harmful, like you should not follow them. And that
Wow.
was one of them is like don't drink water from cactus because it gives people diarrhea. I don't remember why, but it gives you diarrhea and basically so that the diarrhea of course dehydrates you.
That's huh. I mean, good to know. If I'm ever in the desert, I'm not going to drink from a cactus. Wow. That's so. I wonder why that. Like, I wonder why cactus water of all things would give you diarrhea. That doesn't make much sense.
Let's look it up.
Yeah. I mean, that's Google is a wonderful tool. But yeah, I mean, I think was there anything else in terms of? Oh, there was one more thing on Rango that I had. I don't know if you had any other comments on Rango.
Not that I can think of, but this article here says that the moisture inside of the cactus pulp is highly acidic, and that's why it gives you diarrhea.
Oh, that makes sense. I can see that.
It has it also decreases blood sugar levels.
Huh. Wow. So yeah, avoid cactus water at all costs, apparently. Good
Hmm.
good to know. Good to know. I bet it's great for like cleansings and stuff.
That's true.
Not that I would ever want to do that, but for
Yeah, I'm
anyone
not
who's
gonna
looking
go to
for
the
that.
desert to cleanse.
I bet you could do it really quick though. You sweat off all of that weight and then you drink some cactus juice and
Yeah,
pass the
that's
rest
true.
of it.
Then just die.
And then just there you go. I mean, hey, you won't you'll lose the weight you want to lose.
Exactly.
But see, we
No,
should
but
start our
yeah,
own advice column.
yeah, we should. Yeah, what not to do and then just do it.
Exactly. That's a great solution. But
But I do want to say, like, um, Rango did a good job of tackling modern day issues like droughts and things like that and farms that we're still going through. It's not a movie that takes place in the past, even though it's a western. It's like a modern day western,
yeah.
and it tackles a lot of issues that people deal with. and issues that maybe you don't realize on first viewing, or things that you may not think about, like Rango trying to fit in to a different culture, different way of life. Um, so I mean, yeah, I just think that the performances are fantastic too. I mean, very convincing, very, just grabs your attention, and I'm really glad we covered it. I like talking about movies that I like, so
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good one. I'm glad that you recommended it because I hadn't thought about Rango in
one day you'll
years.
convince me to talk about Wally. Maybe one day.
Hey, I've done my Wally episode. I'm okay, but I mean, I'm always happy to have you come on. I still want you to do How to Train Your Dragon. I know you're
Yeah.
refusing, but one day we'll see.
Oh man, that's
uh,
I don't know what it is. I know that people love that movie. I like
it's one
the
of my
second one better
favorites.
in my opinion.
The second one's
Um,
good. I'll give you that.
I don't even think I've seen what is it? Is it the third one is the latest one?
Yeah, the third one, I think it's
I
the
haven't
last
even
one.
seen that one yet,
I haven't seen the
oddly
third one
enough.
yet either, honestly.
I heard it was pretty good too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first one, I don't know. It just wasn't like super memorable. I haven't seen it in a long time, so I should probably watch it again.
Yes.
Um,
I would do.
but yeah, maybe we can do that.
I mean, hey, I am working on a new podcast. I'm going to use my How to Train Your Dragon episode as a crossover between the two. So, I
Oh,
mean, I could use some help.
yeah.
All
I'll watch it. I'll force myself to watch it.
right. All right. I know it's terrible, but you made me do an episode on Rango. So,
No, I just don't remember it that much. It wasn't like super memorable to me. So usually that means I didn't care for it, but maybe I
yeah.
was just too young. I don't know.
And to
We'll
be fair,
see.
that's how I was about Rango. I was kind of like, really? Rango? And then I rewatched it and I was like, yeah, this is a great movie. I ignored it for too long.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, and I think kind of the best closing note on Rango that I could find is that it sometimes to fix a solution, somebody from a different background, from a different perspective is the way to go. I mean, I think that's definitely the case for agriculture. Having advice from people who aren't in agriculture.
Hmm.
I know a lot of farmers are typically hesitant to that because they're like, well, they don't farm, they don't know, and that's true. Maybe
Right.
they don't, but they can bring some ideas that are like, hey, you didn't think about that one. That might help you in the
Hmm.
long run.
Yep. Yeah,
So
that's true.
yeah. So moral of the day, never turn somebody away just because they're different from you. But that being said, I think that kind of wraps up all my thoughts for the episode. At this time, I'd like to invite you to remind everyone where they can find all your stuff if they're looking for it.
We still have our website up. We still
Cool.
are on Spotify and all the good stuff, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We've not released an episode in a while. I've been
Mm.
crazy busy with my new job, and we're planning on moving soon in a few weeks. And Logan's got a new job too that he got a while ago. So we do have an episode we recorded back in July that I still have not edited. So we have an episode on the back burner, and we haven't given up on the podcast just yet. We've
Mhm.
just been taking a kind of a long break.
Just yet. You say it like you're planning on getting up at some point.
No. I'm just waiting for Logan to tap out. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding.
Whoever gives up first.
Yeah, we just don't want to. We don't want to give up on our dream, so
Yeah.
it's still there.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I mean, I'm technically on hiatus right now, so I mean, once my new season starts, I'll get back into the swing of things. But right now, I'm kind of taking my own breaks, so it's okay to take
Yeah,
breaks.
yeah, yeah. And it's not. It wasn't intentional. It just happened.
Yeah.
Life got busy, so yeah.
Yeah. Life has a way of doing that, but yeah. So I'll link all your stuff down in the description. Yeah, everyone can go check out Absolutely Gobsmacked, and you're everywhere you find podcasts, correct?
Yep, even YouTube.
Sweet. Yeah. All right. Well, I will send everyone your way. Thanks again, Brayden, for coming on. It's always a pleasure. We always have interesting conversations, one way or another.
Yeah,
Whether it be about, cactus juice giving you diarrhea or about the Martian giving you
yep,
diarrhea, or
yeah.
we talk a lot about poop on my podcast. What the heck is up with that?
In our speech episode, right? No,
I don't, I mean, maybe I not that I remember. I hope
I hope
not. That's a
not.
little weird one, but uh, but yeah, so thanks again for coming on, Brayden. It's always a lot of fun. We'll catch
Yeah,
up soon.
absolutely. We'll have you back on the show.
Awesome. Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, everyone go check him out. It's a lot of fun, a good show to listen to. So I'll send everyone your way. And thanks to all of the listeners for tuning in for this, I think, a great episode. We'll see what they think. Um, But yeah, I think that kind of wraps things up for us. So thank you everyone so much for tuning in, and don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.